What the heck was Luka Doncic thinking at the end of the game and the Mavs lost to the Utah Jazz? Plus, we're going to choose the most surprising and disappointing teams in today's episode of Locked On NBA Game Night.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
Welcome to another edition of a Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night on Fridays. I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and the host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast.
And I'm John Karalis, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast, on Twitter at John_Karalis. Can I start giving my blue sky?
Yeah, throw it out there.
John Karalis, over there. No underscore.
Oh, even simpler here. We got no excuse, right?
No excuse. Yeah, let's take this party to blue sky.
There you go. Today's episode of Locked On NBA Game Night is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Oh, only one game on Thursday night, but man,
I'm exhausted from watching all that basketball.
I don't know who had it easier, us or Luka Doncic on that final play where he absolutely fell asleep. Look, Utah Jazz beating the Dallas Mavericks 115-113. It was the Utah Jazz the whole way. Tie game after Klay Thompson hits a three to tie it. And then I don't even know how to describe like what we saw. Luka Doncic just fell asleep, and Jordan Clarkson from the top of the three-point line rifles the ball down low to John Collins, who just goes up for like an uncontested dunk on just a play that is like mind-blowing. I've watched this about 20 times since it ended like a couple of minutes ago to just maybe see what Luka was trying to figure out. There's no excuse for this. This was horrific. If you want to think it's bad, let's check in on Nick Angstead, host of Locked On Mavs, and see how he's doing right now.
Lose to the Utah Jazz. It's not that bad, right? It's not like they just lost to the worst team in the West. Luka just totally fell asleep on the last possession. And the Mavs defense was terrible in the third quarter. And it's not like they didn't get out to a bad start again. It's not like Jason Kidd played Dwight Powell and Gafford together and Dwight Powell and Lively together. And Lively finally got the start and then got in foul trouble real quick and then didn't play. It's not that bad, right? And the Mavs said, "Oh, we're playing the worst team in the West. We can just sit Kyrie tonight." Yeah, that's good. It's not like Klay Thompson couldn't get anything going off the dribble at all against the Jazz, which is like probably not a great sign for the rest of the season. All right. More on Locked On Mavs later.
It kind of probably sums it up a little bit here. I mean, what do you think about the final play there, John?
I am flummoxed.
Yeah.
Flummoxed. But
just what happened, man?
So I love the replay that showed Clarkson's face.
Oh, it's incredible.
Because he's just like, he's so expressive, but it's like he also doesn't want to he can't be cool about it. He can't just be like wide-eyed and like looking and trying to give the eyes. He's like, he sees it and he's like, "Oh my God." Internally, he's just screaming, "This can't be happening." And
it very much happened.
So I don't know why Doncic turned so blatantly. Like you knew they were setting up. They were bringing the clock down. It was a tie game. So their whole thing was to bring the clock down so you don't leave any time on the clock. But that play was so wide open, you had to make that pass to get that dunk. But when you're Doncic, you got to know where your guy is.
It almost looked like he was defending the guy on the wing, who I can't remember who it was at the time, and like got confused on which was his guy. That's not better.
He had a defender out there. No, they're setting up Clarkson's at the top of the key dribbling. There's no switching. No one has moved. They haven't started their play yet. He knows that he has Collins in the dunker spot. And so for some reason, he's worried. My guess is that they were going to switch everything, and he was anticipating a movement, and he was going to switch onto the guy on the perimeter. But that doesn't explain how you completely lose track of your guy. It's a James Harden-esque complete failure. It's literally the single worst mistake you could make in that situation. And look, Doncic is great in so many ways, but at some point we're going to have to like factor the defense into his, you know, as great as he is, they just lost in the finals because, you know, he was targeted on defense. Yeah, injury and all that stuff, but like the game plan is target Luka Doncic on defense. And when he's making these types of plays, it's like glaring. So at some point, the conversation is going to start to flip to like, yeah, Luka is great, but I mean, how much of a negative is he going to be? What was he in this game? What was his plus minus in this game?
He was a -8. That was the worst out of all of the starters. The only player worse was Daniel Gafford at -19 on the night. You know, we can focus on this final play, and like truthfully, we should focus on this final play here. But the Mavs have been in some trouble here. This is their 4th straight loss, and you saw Jason Kidd be so frustrated with his team. They were resting Kyrie Irving in this, but he went with basically like a completely different starting lineup from what he's been using, finally giving the start to Derek Lively, putting in Maxi Kleba as well, and starting Quentin Grimes, and like that still didn't produce the desired results, right? Like he went with like 3 out of 5 starters being different. Would have been, you know, they could have kept Kyrie in there. And they still went down 18 to the Utah Jazz because that defense is not what it was at the end of last season.
It's not. And the way, look, I don't want to say it was fool's gold at the end of last season because they had a really prolonged run. But it was always, I think, too much to expect it to come out right away and be exactly what it was. I think you had to take the entire season into account. And frankly, each new season brings with it new challenges, brings with it relearning things from the beginning. And guys like Lively have to, after everything that's happened, you got to start completely over in a lot of ways with the chemistry and with some, you know, with that finals kind of history behind them. There's like, I don't know what the best way to put it, like attitude. You have to make sure that everybody's got the same kind of hunger to reach it and isn't coming into this next season like, yeah, we've done it. Now we can kind of like coast our way through it. You know, you've got to start from the beginning building those habits. And I don't think they have that same urgency to do so.
No, I was watching ESPN today before this game, and I think it was Kendrick Perkins who said they were like lacking pride. They were like, to use one word to kind of say what's wrong with them. And I don't know if I fully agree with that, but I kind of get the same vein of what you're trying to say there, where it's like something in terms, whether it's professionalism or something is just lacking from this team right now. And it's leading to 4 straight losses and losing to the worst team in the league. The Utah Jazz did win the game. Let's get David Locke here to give us the Jazz perspective on what happened in this win.
The Utah Jazz have stunned the Dallas Mavericks tonight. The Jazz had a 16-point lead in the 4th quarter. Lauri Markkanen went out with an injury. The offense disappeared, and things were falling apart. The Mavericks, behind Luka Doncic, were cutting into the Jazz. But then the veterans, Jordan Clarkson and John Collins, made the plays late. Jordan Clarkson hitting a miracle 3 on the left side as the shot clock was expiring, then nailed back-to-back buckets, ending a 4-minute Jazz drought. And with the game on the line, he called Luka Doncic up. He drove on him, beat him into the lane, flipped it up short. John Collins dunked it home. And then on the final play of the night, John Collins back toward the basket. Luka Doncic supposed to be guarding him. Instead of coming up for a pick, as everyone anticipated, Jordan Clarkson made eye contact, bulleted a pass to John Collins, surprising a flat-footed Luka Doncic. Collins dunked it. Jazz win. Mavericks have lost 4 in a row, and the Jazz have their first home win of the year.
He mentioned John Collins a lot right there. That was a dude who was huge in this game.
Hey, how about a game of real or fake real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
Real or fake, Jake Madison? John Collins is rebuilding his trade value and will actually be moved this season.
So Collins had 28 points in this one, 9 rebounds. It's perfect 7-7 from line. He was good, just 10 at 20. I'm going to go real, but it's not like insanely high value, right? Like this was a good game where they didn't have Walker Kessler, and because Lauri Markkanen was out in this one, and that allowed him to play more of a role. And he's best for them when he is their like starting center. He's not always doing that with some of the other guys there. So I don't know how much he can rebuild it, but he showed you, especially in this game, like that's a useful piece for a team that like just needs a reliable big man like that.
Yeah, but I'm going to say fake because he makes $26.5 million.
Yeah, that's what's tough here.
That's a tough number, and he's got 1 year left on that deal. So,
and he's not starting. This was his first start of the season.
Yeah.
Sorry, second start of the season.
It's a player option, which he's definitely going to pick up. And if he does rebuild his value, if this is the beginning of rebuilding his value, then Danny Ainge is running the Jazz, and I know what Danny Ainge is going to ask for. So if the value is there, then Danny Ainge is going to be like, okay, let's go, first round picks. And you just cannot give up first round picks for John Collins at this point, considering that number. So great to see him getting, putting a nice start to the season together. I actually think that we'll call it an offensive rebound, but it's more of like an alley-oop off the air ball to get that dunk. That was a almost as an egregious a lapse for the Mavericks as the Doncic one was. But Collins there, the awareness was great, but not. Look, I hope he continues this. It's going to be great. I just don't think he's going to be moved this season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough to find a deal. It's the dollar amount. The value could be there, but if you can't make a trade work, like that's kind of the big part of the problem. But look, it was fun to see him star in this game, and he did a really good job. And Dallas Mavericks have some questions that need to be answered. Be sure to go check out Locked On Jazz and Locked On Mavs for more on those teams. So coming up next, who are the most surprising teams in the NBA? We're going to take a look at that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On NBA Game Night. Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25 APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. And thank you for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen today and every day, literally every day. We are here Monday through Sunday, 7 days a week. No one else coming to y'all like this, recapping everything going on around the association. Even when it's just one game, we're here. But when there's like 15, we cover it too. It's a lot of fun. So please go find your own Locked On podcast, whether it's Locked On Pelicans, Locked On Celtics, Mavs, Jazz. We have them all. And by the way, newsletters for each and every team daily. Go to lockedondaily.com to find your team. Just click on the logo, then you sign up with your email. Really great one-stop shop coverage for team and league coverage. All right, John, there's no more games to talk about, so let's switch gears here a little bit. It was an easy Thursday here, which is kind of fun. So I saw this on ESPN. I want to basically steal it. Look at some of the most surprising teams here in the NBA. If you had to pick one team as your most surprising one when we're about a tenth of the way through the season or so, a little bit more than that, who's the most surprising team to you?
I mean, I love 10th of the season coverage. I mean, that's the best coverage in the NBA. Couple of good choices out there. I'm actually going to go with the Golden State Warriors at 9-2. Surprising that they're that good already with a win in Boston, which impressive there. I got to see it firsthand. The defense has been really good, and I was curious to see how it would look in person. And man, they are active, they are physical, they're handsy, they know what they're trying to do. They are getting great contributions from all of their role players, and obviously Steph Curry is still Steph Curry, but not like they've adjusted into a very nice kind of new updated version of themselves, right? It's not the same old Warriors, but still some of the same old Warriors. It's like a new product. It's like a car that got a little bit of a redesign, you're like, oh wow, that's a nice new grill. It's a little sleeker. They've done very well. I'm very impressed with the Golden State Warriors.
No, I agree with you, right? And they're also they're 3-0 in the game Steph Curry doesn't play either, which is, I think, what's most impressive. And when you look at the two losses they have, it's to the Clippers, who I'm going to talk about in a second here, and the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? Like, those aren't horrible losses to have, I think, especially with that Clippers one just being in the third game of the season. Defensively, Draymond Green looks like he's turned back the clock a little bit, and he's doing enough shooting offensively to really keep them going. I don't know if Draymond Green's going to keep up a 46% 3-point percentage, but man, when you play defense like that and hit a couple of those threes, that's a pretty big game changer for him. Do they have the strongest culture in the league? Like, is this a culture thing?
I think, yeah, you can say that. I think it's more than anything, it is a Draymond Green thing. He is the heart of that team. And when he's healthy and active defensively, the way he is, he can be a defensive player of the year type of guy. He's not going to have, I don't think, a defensive player of the year season, because he's probably going to miss some games and it's going to be up and down probably. But when he at his best, he can still hit that level. So you can call it culture. I just think that they've got strength defensively in Green, and obviously they got strength offensively in Steph, and those guys, they are very good teammates. Well, maybe a couple people might disagree with Draymond Green.
Like, are you sure?
But I will say that Draymond, aside from a couple of those incidents, I would say he's probably still regarded as a pretty good teammate. So it's kind of funny to say about a guy who like went at it with Kevin Durant and punched Jordan Poole in the face.
Jordan Poole, yeah.
But that aside, I think within the construct of that team, like on the floor, he's tough, but I think he works well with those guys and gets them in the positions, and I think he does give them the confidence to play. Like when he gives them the ball, he wants them to shoot, he wants them to do the things they need to do with the ball. So I still stand by the comment.
Yeah, look, they've added some decent pieces, right? Buddy Hield was a great pickup for them and just kind of fits exactly what they want to do offensively, right? Like Brandon Podziemski is great off the bench and just filling a variety of different roles. I'm curious to see how the DeAnthony Mountain injury is going to impact him. It sounds like he's going to be out for a while, if not the season. That can really hurt. But no, I agree with you. They're probably the biggest surprise this season with the way that they've been playing and how they've looked. And to me, it's just like, man, they're the Golden State Warriors and they know what they're doing and they find the right pieces. They make them fit. That's why I asked you kind of about the culture thing here. We hear a lot about Heat culture. Do we hear enough about like the Golden State Warriors and what they've kind of done there?
That's fair.
I've got two for you here, but I want to start with the weirder one. What about I think the Los Angeles Clippers at 6-6 might be one of the most surprising teams in the league here. And I'm also shouting this out because my buddy DC Wade yelled at me in text messages the other day about this as a diehard Clipper fan there. 6-6 for a team that lost Paul George, didn't really replace him, hasn't had Kawhi Leonard play a game. Look, 6-6 doesn't sound exciting. It's not like they're top of the West, but I was expecting this team to be one of the worst in the league, and they're really not right now. They're kind of riding through it with defense, and then a couple of just guys stepping up. I don't know if Norm Powell is going to keep averaging 25 points per game this season, But I mean, it's showing something. You're seeing Harden rewind the clock, not fully, but like a couple of years too.
Yeah. Look, I didn't expect them to be the worst team in the league.
I thought they were going to be pretty garbage.
Yeah, I didn't think they were going to be garbage. So I'm not shocked at a couple of these wins. They also have wins over the Raptors, Sixers, and Spurs. So look, they have a few wins there that are, not the toughest games in the world. So maybe a little bit of although they did lose to the Blazers.
Man, I'm not about to talk about that when the team I cover lost to that team twice.
Yeah. Blazers have been doing some work actually. But yeah, I'm not looking at the Clippers as like a big surprise right now. I think couple of easier games, and they still have some talent there. So them being hovering around 500, I kind of felt like that was where they would end up, maybe a little bit below. And that's going to mean they're going to miss the playoffs in the West.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Look, I think 500 is about where they should be now. And maybe I just was like really down on them, but to me, that's been a big surprise. What about the Cavaliers? I think, I think with the Clippers and the Cavs, right? Like coaching matters in the league here. And you're kind of seeing it through some of these teams. Ty Lue is really good. He's dragging that team in my opinion, but look at just what a coaching change did basically to a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like we'd be remiss if we weren't at least mentioning that team that is still undefeated at 13-0 with some pretty significant wins.
I think the Cavs actually come into this season with a lot of the same mentality, the things that they wanted to prove, like the Celtics had last season. They have a lot to prove. There were questions about Donovan Mitchell, doesn't even want to be there, and he re-signs. Then there were questions, oh, well, he stuck around. That means Darius Garland is gone. No, they kept him, and they are working hard to make that work. Like Donovan Mitchell has deferred to Garland in clutch situations in some of these wins. Evan Mobley, questions about him and how good is he really, and what can he, how can he expand his game, and the coaching stuff and all of that stuff. So I think some of this is the Cavs have come in after a really disappointing playoff exit to the Celtics. I mean, they wanted to be more of a challenge to the Celtics. So they came into the season, I think, with a lot of things that they wanted to prove. So they're taking this October, November schedule where maybe some other teams are easing into the season, and they're going at it full bore from the beginning. So I like the fact that they're doing that. And now the question is, can they sustain it? But that they are a very pleasant surprise. They're working very hard to do what they're doing. They've got incredible point differential, and they're a real legit contender. Now, can they spend the rest of the season avoiding like that 4 or 5 game losing streak to kind of negate some of this? That's what we've got to see now moving forward.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that maybe concern you slightly about them, and maybe they don't take enough threes to keep up with, say, like a team like the Celtics in like a 7-game series, something like that. But overall, like their offense is good, the defense is really solid. It's just growth, and man, coaching makes a difference in this league when maybe at times we kind of underrate it. But Kenny Atkinson taking over basically the same team, and look at what they've done. They've been really good. Obviously, they're one of the big surprises of the season. Let us know in the comments down below on YouTube who your surprise teams are. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Let us know down below, and be sure to check out Locked On Warriors, Locked On Clippers, Locked On Cavs for more on all of some of the surprising teams here. But what about those teams that are just disappointing us? We're not even mad at them. We're just disappointed. Let's look at those coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On NBA Game Night. Today's episode of Locked On NBA Game Night is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on all of the action all in one place. So when you know momentum is shifting one way, or the Utah Jazz are going to give up that big time lead, you can get in on the updated lines that are constantly shifting. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You could have just taken the Utah Jazz at +8.5, and you would have won outright right there. And then if you'd placed a $5 bet, won that, you'd get $150 in bonus bets. That's when you win your first $5 bet. And that's over at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And thank you for making it a Locked On NBA game night, every game, every night, even when there's just one. Hear your first listen today and every day. We're covering everything you want to know about the association. All games will be covered this whole season on this show, which I actually think is like a pretty cool thing that we're doing here. Now for your second listen, it's just reading. Just go to LockedOnDaily.com and sign up for your team's newsletter. Every single one. John writes his, I write mine. There's league coverage in there too from some really great writers we brought on board. One-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage over at LockedOnDaily.com. All right, John, we went over the teams that were surprising us, but what about those other ones, the kind of bottom dwellers here, the disappointing teams?
Can we start? I mean, I know who I said I was going to start with, but can we start with the team we just watched?
Yeah,
lose?
like I think we have to put that in, right?
Can we
like
just throw the Mavs in there?
Yeah.
5-7, 4 losses in a row, losing to the Jazz, unable to close in fourth quarters, starting slow, finishing poorly. That's disappointing for a team. Like, I know everybody loves to make their predictions in the summer, and has anybody ever not predicted a finals rematch? But the Mavs were very impressive finishing the season. That finals run was very impressive. It ended with a little bit of a thud, but like there was still reason to be excited.
I mean, they got there in the first place. Like you don't get there by a fluke.
Right. And to start out 5-7 and, you know, to see Luka not perform in the clutch like we expect him, to see that defense struggle, to see the lineup issues, it's a disappointing start to the season for the Mavs.
Yeah, I agree. You know, at 5-7 here, like that doesn't feel good. I was less high on them than some other people. Like when they went on that pretty not miraculous run at the end of last season and then through the playoffs, you had to wonder how much that was going to be able to be like propelled going forward. And look, they're dealing with some injuries too, right? Like PJ Washington not playing in this game, I think is pretty significant for them in their defense, which really would have helped them here. So give them their credit, right? Like they didn't have Kyrie Irving in this one, but still something feels off for Jason Kidd to make like that dramatic of a starting lineup change, whether that's to send a message or he's just fed up. It's like, I got to do something. That doesn't scream like a good situation right off the bat.
So let me get my other one, which is another.
I wonder which is what this team might be.
Well, it's the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, we've been talking about them a lot.
That's the other obvious one. Their defense is so terrible. You can't guard anybody. Like it's just bad. You look at what they've. You go back to that Dame trade and the Chris Middleton injury. Those two things have just been decimating to the Bucks. They needed Giannis to go off for 59 to beat the Pistons in overtime.
What an awesome night last night, by the way, was in the NBA, right? Like Wednesday night was awesome. No, they did. And you got to see that from him. They won 2 in a row. I wonder if that lulls them into like a false sense of security of like where that team is a little bit too. Like, do they feel they've righted the ship? Probably not off of 2 wins, but yeah, it took a Herculean effort from Giannis, and that barely was enough.
Yeah, so I just don't think they're going to need Chris Middleton to come back as very close to the best Chris Middleton that he's been for them to turn this thing around, because they need his defense on top of his scoring. So, but having watched the Celtics play them a couple of times and how relentlessly Boston targeted Damian Lillard, he is such a negative defensively that it just tears the whole thing apart. I just don't see the Bucks as a serious contender in the East anymore unless Middleton comes back and is somewhere close to his best. So it was a very precipitous drop for the Bucks. They made the Damian Lillard trade and they thought, here we go, retooling, moving forward. It's just all been downhill after that.
Yeah, at least they got Giannis to sign the extension right out of that. Like
Sure.
that's what that feels like it was, and that
And
alone is probably worth it. But
they're in the East. So, like, as much as I'm sitting there saying I'm disappointed and they don't look to be certain, they're also 8.5 games out of first, 2.5 games out of third. So they are a small winning streak away from popping back into the top of the standings, and it's still not even Thanksgiving. So they're lucky they're not out west where this would have been much more disastrous. So even we could talk about the Sixers, although I don't.
I'm not worried about them. They just haven't had anyone play, right? Like,
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Yeah, but even the Sixers, like they're still within striking distance even after all of this.
yeah, like the Sixers, I don't want to bring up. Like, if Paul George and Embiid were playing a ton and this was their record, right, at
Yeah.
2-9, then I'd be like, what the
100%.
heck is going on here? But we just kind of assume they'll get right, and maybe we revisit this conversation later in the season. Where like, oh yeah, they didn't put it all together with everything that's going on there, and that's a big disappointment because that's a team that everyone kind of projected to be at the top of the Eastern Conference. Another team that, was projected to maybe compete with the Celtics this season and still might. They're the 4th seed in the East is the New York Knicks, but at 5-6 after like everything they did this offseason, we kind of expected them to come out and look incredible, like basically like the Cavaliers, in my opinion, and they haven't, right? Their offense is good. That's 4th best, but the defense being 19th after bringing Bridges in and some of the other moves they did, like, doesn't feel particularly good to me.
Can I just say that I'm not that surprised that you bring Karl Anthony Towns in and your defense suffers? I just look.
That's fair.
I questioned that at the beginning, and to be fair, that trade happened right before training camp, and the biggest issue I had from the Knicks side was it's such a disruptive trade to make right before training camp. Contrast that with the Celtics getting Drew Holiday right before training camp. He was so much more plug and play. Karl Anthony Towns, when you bring him in to be your best or second best player, you have now changed the entire dynamic of your offense. You have taken away the interior presence, the toughness, the defense. You've taken away the rebounding, all the stuff that led to the fast breaks, all of the stuff that led to the second chance points and all the stuff that made the Knicks great last season. You now have to play an entirely different style. It is extraordinarily difficult to get a guy that is as impactful as Karl Anthony Towns just before training camp and walk into the season and be like ready to go. So I am willing to give the Knicks a pass. They are, you're not wrong. They are disappointing, but I am willing to give the Knicks a pass because you need a lot of time to figure out how Towns plays with all of these guys. And you need more than the time that they've had. So I'm considering the 2024 portion of their schedule almost an extended preseason for them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So if they're still hovering around 500, like if their January record is still 500, if they head into the All-Star break without having made any kind of run, put any kind of winning streak together, then I'm going to say this is a problem. Right now, they're the 4th seed. They are figuring themselves out. So I'm willing to give them time to do so.
I think that's fair. Look, it's all still a little early, but I think at this point in the season, we can kind of get some idea of some of these teams here, but it is a little early on that. And you make a good point of it happening right before training camp and them trying to kind of figure out what to do, how to use some of those guys. They're still going to be a pretty fun team, and the vibes seem pretty high there too. So I think that's an important thing. We miss anybody here?
Can I just point out that it's not April 1st, and I am being fair to the Knicks and the Sixers? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
I have a question for you. Do you want to say anything nice about the Atlanta Hawks?
The Atlanta Hawks just beat the Boston Celtics. They did it without Trae Young, though. The Celtics, the last 3 times the Celtics have faced the Hawks without Trae Young, they have lost.
Interesting. Oh boy.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens.
Oh boy. That's an interesting stat. Like you just throw that one out there, presented without comment, right? And let people draw their own conclusions.
It's a fact. The Hawks beat the Celtics 3 straight times where Trae Young has missed.
Okay, so that might be John saying something nice about the Atlanta Hawks as he was called out on Twitter the other day here. So we're going to end it there. You got what you wanted. That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night. On Fridays, we co-host Jake Madison at Nola Jake on Twitter, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast.
I'm John Karalis. Find me on Twitter, John_Karalis. Find me on Blue Sky without the underscore, John Karalis. I am host of the Locked On Celtics podcast.
It's the NBA Cup night on Friday. A bunch more games. We're going to, of course, have this covered for you here on this show, this channel on Saturday. Make sure to give it a listen to recap all the action on all the crazy courts. It's going to be a lot of fun. That's going to do it. We'll see y'all next week.